Hello, ghouls and ghosts, sinners and saints everywhere, and welcome to the first episode of the Hindsight Horror podcast, Reboot. So some of you have probably been here since the beginning, since it was just me, and I have decided to rearrange things so it's a more conversational podcast. So today we have your host, Ashleigh, and their co-host...
The Courtney machine.
The Courtney machine. So for those of you who haven't been here from the beginning, this podcast is going to be about symbolism in horror movies. And today we're talking about the movie Horns, which we had a little debate yesterday about what genre Horns falls in. So it could be horror, but it's kind of more of like a murder mystery.
Because they kind of marketed it more as a horror movie than it ended up being when we all went and saw it.
I don't even remember seeing too many previews for it or anything.
Yeah, me either. Which normally I like because they tend to show too much in previews nowadays, I feel. You know what I mean? I feel like I know everything that's gonna happen when I see them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. They put the best jump scare in the preview now.
Yeah.
And so you're waiting for that the whole time, and it completely ruins the suspense.
Mm-hmm.
I think, unfortunately, for movie production companies, there's a lot of disconnect between, the people in charge of advertising and then the people who are actually making the movie.
Yeah.
Good amount of the time, the people who are making the movie don't want those things to be in the trailer.
Right.
So generally I'll see a trailer for a movie and then I just will go out of my way to not watch any more. Because otherwise just the whole thing is ruined, pretty much.
Yeah. Disappointing.
So in honor of the movie Horns, we're going to be taking a Which of the 7 Deadly Sins Are You quiz. Just before we get started, kind of break the ice, get us in that deadly sinner mood.
Spicy.
So the first question is, which of the following do you value the most? Money, career, power, love, or nothing in particular? I would say love, personally.
I agree. This is going to turn into a we're the same person again.
I know. And no one was surprised. So this is the second question. Is hatred a feeling that you often experience? Yes, quite often. Occasionally, especially towards certain people. I could only feel hate towards very few people. Hardly, even if I feel animosity towards someone, the feeling usually goes away pretty quickly or never.
I don't know, because, I know it's, very cliche to say, oh, hate's a strong word, but, there's just so much energy put into hating someone, and I just do not care.
I feel that.
I'm going to say towards very few people.
I'm going to say occasionally, especially towards certain people.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because it's a different answer, so we might get a different response to the quiz. But also, I think for me, it's just, there are a handful of people who I just cannot stand.
Mm.
And it's not for any particular reason. They just rub me the wrong way.
That's fair. I don't think I ever have to really be around people that rub me the wrong way. Usually I make it known to whoever I am with that is making me around that person, and then they usually respect that I don't want to be around that person.
Yeah, if it's someone that I truly, truly hate, despise,
mm-hmm.
then I'll not be around those people.
Right.
I guess that would be more I have a disdain towards.
Right.
Because hate really is a strong word. I don't think I really hate anybody.
Yeah.
But that was the question, so. Number 3 is, which of the following writers do you like the most? Shakespeare, Duras, Mark Twain.
Choo-choo Twain.
Oh, please kill me now. Mark Twain, Hugo, or none of them?
Oh, man.
I guess Shakespeare, because that's the one I'm the most familiar with.
Same.
Number 4, are you a person with strong desires? Yes, definitely. It's what drives me. Sometimes, depending on the situation, I have always felt desire for a certain thing. Not really, and I have nothing to desire.
I feel like everybody should desire something.
Right?
I'm going to say sometimes, depending on the situation.
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards. But I'll go with, like, yes, definitely, it's what drives me, because I feel like I desire a lot, and then I just get really ambitious and go after it.
Wow, what a Slytherin.
I know.
I know.
Living up to it. Which, I have a Slytherin thing to bring up later regarding this.
Of course you do.
Number 5 is, are you able to tolerate others who make you feel uncomfortable? I already know your answer for this. Not really. I'm not very tolerant. I can't control my emotions on lots of things. I can tolerate others to a certain extent, but also have my own principles, and I wouldn't allow others to violate my principles. I could if I must, but I prefer not to be so tolerant. Yes, I am quite tolerant of others even when they offend me. So for me, I would say yes, I'm quite tolerant of others even when they offend me. Even the people that I don't like very much, I tend to be extremely polite to, and like, unfortunately, just working customer service, you end up dealing with people that you don't like all the time. So you kind of have to put that aside and just be nice.
That's fair.
So I would say yes for me.
I don't know what I want to pick. What do you think I should pick?
I honestly am leaning towards just not really, because I don't feel like you can't control your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's harder for you than it is for me to, like, deal with people that you do not enjoy.
Yeah, no. And it's not even that I'll say anything. It's just, it is very easy to read it on my face, my feelings towards people. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, well. I'm polite for the most part. It's just I'll make a face.
Yeah, that's fair.
The whole time. I will make a face the whole time.
I, like, don't have a poker face at all, ever. I just have gotten really good at... I'm, like, very close friends with my work customer service persona.
That's amazing.
I am able to put them on the front line very quickly. Number 6, so we're halfway there. Number 6 is, which of the following types of people do you think is easiest for you to socialize with? People who speak directly, people who are good at managing their emotions, people who have a sense of humor, people who are lively, and people with a good educational background. That's tough for me, because I socialize with everyone, like...
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say people who have a sense of humor, because, like, I feel like I really only hang out with, like, a very niche amount of people that, like, have a very specific sense of humor.
That's fair, yeah. I definitely cater to a specific sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, like, a sense of humor that I find funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I feel like this is so hard for me, because, like I said, I really socialize with everybody kind of, like, evenly.
Right.
But I guess I would say, of all of these... I would say people have a sense of humor, but I want us to get different, like, results. So I'm going to say people who speak directly,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that the kind of person that I really don't do well with is people who are passive-aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I can't deal with that at all, so I'd rather just have somebody be upfront.
Right. Or people who are sending, like, mixed signals and stuff, and it's just like, what's the game here? Like...
Yeah. No, I'm too old for the mixed signals crap. Like, I'd rather you just tell me things up front.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say that. Number 7, which of the following cold beverages / desserts do you prefer? Fresh fruit shaved ice. Try saying that 5 times fast.
Fresh fruit shaved ice, fresh fruit shaved ice, fresh fruit shaved ice.
Alright, that's 3.
Fresh fruit shaved ice, fresh fruit shaved ice.
Fresh fruit saved the ice.
That fresh fruit really saved my ice.
Fresh fruit shaved ice. Ice cream.
Listen, I am a Gryffindor. When people challenge me to things, I have to jump in and try my best.
Oh, I know. The whole podcast is just a Slytherin and a Gryffindor talk about scary movies.
Amazing. What a concept.
Whack.
Whack, 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 whack.
So it's fresh fruit, shaved ice, ice cream, cold drinks that don't contain sugar and milk.
Those are sad.
That is sad. Anything, as long as it tastes good. I don't like cold beverages or desserts.
Who doesn't like either of those things?
I was just thinking that. A cold-hearted bastard.
Like, you don't like cold water? Cold water is the king of water flavors.
That's That's someone who has no joy in their life at all.
I'm gonna go with ice cream because I'm an asshole.
I knew you were gonna pick ice cream.
Of course you knew I was gonna pick ice cream. You know what my favorite places in the whole world? This is yeah, this is a recommendation for anybody in New York that is like around like I would say the Newburgh, Middletown, like Goshen, Chester area. If you're around there, go to Bellevale Creamery. It is in Warwick, New York, at the top of Mount Peter, and it is the best ice cream you will ever have. It actually made like the top. I think it's like number 2 on Travelocity's list of like ice cream places in the U.S. Please go there. It is the best. My personal favorite is Bellevale Bog. It's got these little like brownie chunks mixed in. It is to die for. I wait for it every year. It's only available from like April to October, and then they close down for the season, and it is my favorite thing in the whole wide world. I would kill a man for that.
This is the most passionately you are going to hear Courtney talk about anything on this podcast.
Listen, I am a Taurus, okay? I have some needs and wants, and that is all of them.
Things we've learned about Courtney so far. She is a Taurus and a Gryffindor.
What a combo.
And an ice cream connoisseur.
Listen, Cold Stone has nothing on Bellevale.
I love ice cream, but I'm honestly going to say anything as long as it tastes good, because I'm not super picky about desserts.
I mean, I guess. There's lots of good desserts, but you know what? Ice cream just hits different.
Number 8. It's getting very late, but you still haven't finished your work. What would you do?
Flashbacks.
To, like, last night?
Well, I meant, like, more to, like, college, when I would go to sleep and then, like, wake myself up at, like, 2 a.m. to write a paper and then go back to sleep.
What a time.
Like, I'd be like, you know what? 1 hour of sleep, and then I'll wake back up and write my paper.
1 hour sleep, that's fine.
Yeah, you know. Listen, it worked.
I'm tired now, but I don't think I'll ever be the level of exhausted that I was in college.
What a mood.
Well, the options that we have for the quiz are you have to finish the work before going to bed. That I don't think has ever happened to me. Push yourself to stay up, but when you can't keep your eyes open any longer, you'd go to bed.
Nah, that's when you just drink a whole bunch of coffee.
Oh yeah, no, you're not going to bed at that point.
Mm-mm.
Hesitate for a while before deciding to go to bed. And I would go to bed, of course. Okay, listen, none of these are what I would do, because what I would do is chug a ton of coffee and stay up and do my work.
Yeah, like, have a whole pot of coffee.
Yeah, and, like, water and snacks.
Yeah. Like, you have to stay up.
And like, a good, like, funny podcast or live comedy show, because it's, like, impossible for me to feel tired while I'm laughing at something.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm up and laughing, or if I have a friend with me that I'm laughing with, then I'm golden. But if I'm by myself trying to stay up, that's
fair.
It's dicey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like, I don't know. I would stay awake for, like, days. Like, just fueled by coffee and the sheer fear of fail.
Honestly.
Yeah. And then, like, when it got to the point where coffee stopped working, because it does reach that threshold, then I would sleep for, like, a good, like, hour to 2 hours and then wake myself up like an asshole. Or, like, make sure that I had, like, 7 alarms set and a friend that was going to stay up to wake me up and make me complete my work.
Yeah, that's...
the good old days.
The good old days. Now it's like, if I don't have, like, a drawing done that I need for the next day, I'll most likely just wake up super early and draw it in the morning and then get ready to go.
Right.
But it depends on what it is. I think out of these options, I would have to say push yourself to stay up, but when you can't keep your eyes open any longer, you'd go to bed. Mostly because it doesn't give you, like, the time period, so that could be, like, I have been up for 3 days and finally crashed, which has happened.
Yeah, that's a mood. There's been times where I fell asleep on my laptop, like...
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just could not stay awake any longer.
Same. I've fallen asleep at my desk before, like, on paintings.
That is such a mood. Oh my god.
I would have to say, of all of the options, that's probably the one that I would consider the closest to what I would do.
So I'm going to choose something different, and I don't know if I want to do hesitate a while before deciding to go to bed or having to finish the work before going to bed, because I'm very much an all or nothing person.
That's true. I would almost say hesitate.
Yeah, I feel like that's more me, because, like, I would hesitate, and in that hesitation, I would decide whether or not, like, I am able to do this before bed.
Right.
Especially, like, nowadays when not everything is quite as, like, dicey as it was in college. Like, I don't really have a lot of, like, this kind of thing happening anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Luckily. All right, next question.
All right, number 9. What time of day do you prefer? Early morning, afternoon, evening. That's, like, not even a... I mean, unless by early morning they mean, like, 2 a.m., but something tells me that's not what they're talking about.
I don't know. I mean, I get up early, but, like, I don't feel like I prefer it, but I don't know if that's just because, like, everybody's like, oh, it's so much cooler to be a night person, but, like, I don't know.
I don't think it's cooler to be a night person. I am, like, afraid of morning people because they are infinitely more powerful than I am.
Honestly, I just can't get back to sleep, so I have to get up and do things.
That's fair. Usually, like, once I'm up, I'm up.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, because of my hectic sleep schedule and, like, insomnia, that could be any time.
Right.
So,
that's a mood.
Sometimes it's 3 a.m., sometimes it's 7. Who can say?
I'm going to say, I don't know if I want to say morning or afternoon.
I feel like afternoon, because you're usually, like, off work by then, so you can actually, like, chill.
True, I could be, like, a real person.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm going to pick afternoon.
Alright. 10 out of 12. When you feel that you have been treated unfairly by authorities, you would express your anger directly, complain to others in private, feel upset but keep it to yourself, forget about it pretty quickly, it doesn't matter. That's tough for me.
I think it depends on the situation.
It does.
And, like, the severity of, like, you know, the unfair treatment.
Yeah, because generally, I don't forget things quickly. I remember them forever.
Right.
I just get over them quickly.
Yeah.
So, like, I'll be pissed about it for a hot second, and then it's over. Like, I just move on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because if it's something that really, really bothered me, I would express it directly, but most of the time, I just keep it to myself and move on.
Right. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because, like, obviously, if it upset me enough, I would expect it. I would express it directly, but, like, you know, if it wasn't that bad, I'll definitely complain to people about it.
Oh, yeah, because I'm for sure complaining to people about it no matter what.
Yeah.
So, I feel like probably complain to others in private.
That's a big mood.
Number 11. If you wanted to buy a new cup, which of the following would you choose? A Starbucks cup.
Ashley.
A fancy glass. Shut up. A fancy glass. A Japanese teacup.
Ooh.
A clay mug. Or a thermos.
For a second, I read that as Thanos.
I read thermos in my head, and I was like, don't say thermos out loud.
A thermos. A Thanos thermos. Snap.
Same.
I'm kind of torn.
I mean, I love mugs, but I'm gonna have to say a Starbucks cup.
Of course you are.
It was too obvious. It's low-hanging fruit.
I'm very torn between a clay mug and a Japanese teacup.
I would say a Japanese teacup for you.
I do like them, but I also like have a wide collection of mugs.
I know. Same.
So many kinds. I'll go with teacup because you didn't pick clay mug either, so.
Okay, fair. Okay, so 12. You need to wake up early tomorrow to catch a train, but you still have lots of things to do tonight. You would stay up late to finish them, finish the easier parts of the work, finish the harder parts of the work, put the work aside and get ready or pack for the trip. Sleep is the most important thing.
I don't like that the one that says stay up late, like, doesn't say stay up straight until your trip, because that's what I would do.
That's also what I would do, because you can only sleep on the train.
Exactly.
Which is what I do.
Yeah, same.
And whenever I travel anywhere, like, I generally don't sleep the night before.
Yeah.
Just out of anxiety.
It's so stressful, yeah.
I guess I would say stay up late to finish.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to pick the same.
Okay, so... Ooh, it gives you, like, a percentage.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. What's your top one?
My top one is greed.
Mine is also greed.
55.88%.
Oh, mine is a lot less than that.
Oh.
Mine is agreed at 35.48%.
My runner-up is Wrath at 26.47%.
My runner-up is Gluttony at 29.03%.
Oh, so that's almost tied with your top one. Okay.
Yeah.
My third one is Gluttony at 17.65%.
My third one is Lust at 22.58%.
This is so weird. Well, one, I wish they put all 7.
Yeah, like, why do they only have 4?
You have 4?
Oh, yeah, I have 4.
I have 3.
Oh, well, my fourth one is Wrath at 12.90%.
Oh, that's really weird.
That is very weird.
I wish it had all 7 because...
Yeah.
I also just don't agree with mine, but...
That's fair.
It's an internet quiz, so...
I also don't agree with mine.
I kind of feel like Gluttony would be, like, at the top of mine.
I agree. I feel like Gluttony and Wrath might be, like, my top 2, like, if I were to just guess. Or even Sloth, like...
Yeah, what the hell?
I don't know. I don't do shit. Like, why isn't that on here?
You know what, actually, I feel like I'm productive enough that, like, Sloth's not, ironically, like, not all there for me.
Right.
I don't feel like Wrath should be that high for me, though.
I know, right? Like, between the two of us, I definitely should have more Wrath on there, I feel like.
That strikes me as very odd.
The Lust one I'm pretty pleasantly surprised at, though.
I only have 3.
Hanging, yeah.
That is wild. Alright, well, now you know... I thought it was going to tell me, like, what sin I was, not, like, how much percentage of sins I participated in.
Yeah, that was just kind of silly.
Well, now that we know what our biggest deadly sins are, I guess we should talk about the movie. Which is what everybody else is here for. So Horns the movie, that came out in 2013. I think I looked this up yesterday. I can't remember the exact information, but I think in 2013 it came out, like, at the Toronto Film Festival, and it didn't actually come to America in theaters until Halloween of the next year.
Mm-hmm.
We had talked about this yesterday, and I think we came to the conclusion that it was probably around 2015 when we saw it finally.
Yeah.
So, about 4 years ago. I really like this movie.
I also like this movie. A lot of it is because it's got Daniel Radcliffe in it, and he is very attractive to me.
He is very attractive. It's really weird to hear him with the American accent.
Yeah, he definitely, like, it's funny because in the opening, he is narrating as his character, and some of how he pronounces, like, some of the words, like, sounds a little funny.
Yeah.
Because, like, I guess he hadn't, like, super gotten into the accent just yet. Like, specifically how he says the word fire is pretty funny to me. Like, it almost sounds like an Irish accent.
It does,
to me,
kind of.
which is really funny. And it was just cute. I just thought it was really funny. Something stupid that I took note of.
Definitely his dialect, like, kind of goes in and out.
Yeah.
In the movie, like, kind of just throughout the whole movie. And that's typical, too, because they aren't usually filming in chronological order.
Right.
So they'll film a bit here and then film a bit there. So there are some parts where he sounds really American and it's kind of freaky. And then some parts where you can tell that he just is not all there.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen the movie, I guess just to summarize, basically... Yeah, the movie is, like we mentioned earlier, it's kind of a murder mystery whodunit sort of thing. But it's not, I feel like whodunits tend to be kind of campy, and this...
is very not.
It's not. It's pretty serious.
It's gritty.
Yeah, gritty's a good word. I think just because of the nature of, like, how Marin died, I think they try to steer clear of it, I don't know, becoming, like, silly.
Yeah.
I don't think it takes itself too seriously. But there are parts where it does kind of need to get serious because of the subject matter that it's tackling.
Right. Like, there's definitely some, like, I want to say almost funnier scenes. Like, especially, like, after he gets his horns.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin with this, because there's, like, so much going on. basically, the movie opens up and it's Egg, Daniel Radcliffe, and Marin, Juno Temple. And Egg is kind of narrating about how in love with Marin he was and how she was his Garden of Eden. And they're like kissing and you can tell that they're in love. And then suddenly the camera pans and the shot is upside down and it's Egg on the floor, like reaching for an alcohol bottle. So things shift really quickly from good to bad. So he puts on the David Bowie record and is listening to Heroes by David Bowie. And he sees all these news vans outside and they're all chasing him to his parents' house. And basically we find out that it is shortly after Marin was killed. But they haven't really had a trial or anything yet. And they're still kind of collecting evidence and looking at evidence. But they find out that the lab that had the samples from Marin's body was burned down. So there's no way for them to prove Egg innocent or guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just kind of screwed. And this is where we meet Egg's family. So we meet his parents and his brother Terry. But we also meet Lee Torno, who is his lawyer. And he's...
Yeah, and friend.
And friend, yeah, like childhood best friend.
Yeah, so like after Lee is introduced into the scene, we see that clearly he has known Egg for a long time. He's known Terry for a long time. They had the same friend group growing up. And Lee, like, Egg asks Lee about the, Tacoma fires, and about, they mentioned that there's, like, a new witness and stuff.
Mm.
And so, like, Egg asks him about that. Lee doesn't know who it is, but is trying to find out, and also mentions something about Egg, confessing, quote unquote, to the police, which Egg says he didn't, and Lee's trying to get the confession thrown out. And then he heads out to the bar, we see the local bar, and he goes in and, sits down, asks for a drink. Bartender says, like, isn't it like a bit early for him to be drinking, such and such. We find out that Egg works at like a radio station and that he is like not supposed to come in right now. They don't want him coming in because he is a suspected, like, he's a murder suspect. So not everybody wants to hear that on their morning commute. Mm-hmm. And so he's at the bar and bartender doesn't really want to serve. Egg says that, him being a murder suspect and all, he's making the other patrons uncomfortable. To which Glenna jumps in and defends him and says he deserves a drink and such, and tells him that if he'd like to get a drink in a, like, friendlier sense, she gets off at 5.
So Glenna's also, like, part of that friend group with Lee and Egg and Terry.
Yeah.
So they all, like, grew up together.
Yeah, and we later find out that So is one of the cops, actually.
One of the cops, and there's, like, one other character, but he doesn't show up until later.
Right.
So then it kind of jumps from there to this, like, candlelight vigil for Marin, and it's held near the foundry, but, like, I think it's at the cherry tree where she died.
Yeah, it's, like, right underneath the tree house.
So this is all before Egg has the horns.
Right.
So there's the candlelight vigil. He's, like, near the vigil, but kind of off in the distance, getting drunk. And he holds up his lighter to be part of it, but Marin's dad is kind of running the vigil and is talking openly about how Egg, like, murdered Marin.
Right.
So he can't show his face around there. But he waits for everybody to leave, and then he runs down and he ruins the vigil, so he's, like, smashing everything, and then he pisses on a statue of Mother Mary.
Yeah. And smashes it to pieces.
And breaks it.
He just, like, kicks it.
So then Glenna shows up again. And she's basically like, what are you doing? Like, if you're seen out here, they're gonna kill you.
Right.
And then I think they just skip to the next morning.
Yeah, Glenna kind of, like, leads him away. And then they kind of, like, push ahead to, like, the next morning after that. Like, it cuts away, and Egg is speaking as the narrator again. And, like, says that, like, people looked at him like they saw a devil, and, like, now he had to look the part and such. And then it's, like, the morning, and, like, as he's waking up, you see the, like, little bumps on his head. Like, they haven't broken through just yet, but they do look, like, red and irritated. Glenna is then shown to be sleeping next to him, and they actually do a nice pan over to, like, her back, which has a phoenix tattoo on it, which I thought was very interesting, since it's, like, rebirth and like, you know, a turning point or like a new start and such, which I thought was interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and then like he goes to use the bathroom and like happens to notice like his horns and goes and looks at them in the mirror and like touches them, and like as he's doing that, like one of them like suddenly grows a whole lot.
This is
very unevenly at first.
Yeah, it is super uneven. And the sound of it is awful.
It is really bad.
It's like a crunching and like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's like skin tearing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but...
Well, yeah.
So I was reading the book, which is originally written by Joe Hill. I think it came out in 2010, sort of to prepare for the recording of this episode. That was one thing about the book that is different, is that, so it opens up with Ig seeing his horns, and he sees his horns and he's still drunk, and he pisses like all over his feet. But his horns are the size of, like, the length of his ring finger. They're wider at the bottom and longer at the tip, and they're, like, in his skin still. So they don't push through his skin until, like, midway through the book. Mm-hmm. But in the movie, it all happens very quickly. So I think they just... It's easier to attach the prosthetics of the actual horns than it is to try and match skin tone.
Right.
And, like, visually, there's a lot of stuff that they left out of the book or they changed from the book that visually wouldn't be very interesting in a movie. Mm-hmm. But the horns, I think, particularly irritate me because they spend so much... Joe Hill, who's writing it, spends so much time talking about the horns that I'm like, ugh. But he, like, runs out to Glenna, and he's basically like, do you notice anything different about me? And she's going on about how badly she wants to eat this box of donuts. And this is the first in, like, a long line of other characters who confess their sins to Ig, like their deepest desires. And he kind of finds out that he can make them act on these desires, because she eats a whole donut, and then she's like, oh, I don't feel good, but... like, do you think it'll be alright if I have another one? And he's like, go ahead, pig out. And she just starts eating them like her...
like a pig.
Yeah.
Like, just, like, in a trough. Like, just, like, going nuts. I also thought it was funny, because when he does come back in the room to see Glenna, on the TV is, like, a Looney Tunes cartoon of, like, the bulldog, but, like, as a devil.
Oh, yeah. So, we'll talk after the summary about... They get a little heavy-handed with all the, like...
yeah.
devil references and stuff.
Quite on the nose.
And she is saying that she wants to get really fat by eating all these donuts so that, like, no one will want anything to do with her anymore, because she thinks everyone thinks that she's trash anyway, so she might as well just, like, go, like, full tilt into it.
Right.
So then it goes to urgent care to see what's going on with the horns, because this is another thing in the book. They describe that Ig thinks he has a tumor or something. Like, he wonders if they're a hallucination. Mm-hmm. Because Glenna doesn't actually acknowledge his horns. Mm-hmm. It's not until he goes to urgent care that somebody says, like, oh, that doesn't look right.
Right.
And in the movie, she basically says the same thing. The receptionist is like, that sure doesn't look right. And there's, like, this woman in the waiting room and her daughter is screaming her head off. And they all just are, like, confessing their sins to Ig. But this is where Ig finds out that when he touches people, he can, like, visually see their sins, too. So it's not just them telling him about it. He can actually, like, see into their mind and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. So the woman who's there with her daughter, she's basically saying that she wishes she could physically punish her spoiled brat daughter. And then she touches Ig, and Ig sees that she's been, like, having an affair with her golf instructor. And then her daughter says that she wants to burn her mom up. Like, the beginning of the movie, I know pacing-wise, like, why they had to do it, but it all happens so quickly.
Right.
They're like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's quite a trip.
So he finally gets in to see the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, you have horns, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like, they all react very casually to it. No one's like, oh my god, and no one freaks out. And the funny thing about that is that Ig is like, I think if I saw someone with horns, I'd piss down my leg, which in the book, he does piss down his leg when he sees himself with the horns. And the doctor is talking about how he wishes he could snort oxy, and, like, how he's been thinking about his daughter's teenage friend.
Yeah.
Which is really freaky.
Very much so. He also mentions that, like, he kind of forgets about the horns the second he looks away from Ig.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that no one can remember, like, talking to Ig.
Yeah.
Or, like, seeing Ig when he has his horns out. They just kind of, like, forget as soon as he leaves. The doctor puts him under anesthesia to see if he can try and, like, cut the horns off. And while that is happening, we don't know what's going on in the present, but he has a flashback to when he was a kid. And it was him and Terry and Lee and Glenna and one of the cops.
Yeah, I always forget his name.
I know his nickname is Meatbag, but I can't remember like what his actual name is.
Terrible.
Oh, Eric.
Yeah, Eric. Oh my god.
Oh wait, before the Foundry thing, it shows Marin like flashing her cross at Ig.
Yeah.
So Marin has this cross, and they all went to church together, and the sun hits the cross just right so she can flash like a Morse code signal at Ig. So that's the first thing he sees when he goes under anesthetics, and then her cross breaks and she leaves it behind in the pews for him. So he collects it, but it's broken and he doesn't know how to fix it. And then they're at the Foundry, which is like this old, it's the river and like this old logging facility. I don't know what to call it, but it's Terry, Lee, Glenna, Eric, and Ig all together. And they're like just blowing random stuff up with cherry bombs.
As you do.
Like you do, yeah. Like I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, you know, like we've all done.
And they're blowing stuff up, and then they're down to the last one, and Eric's like, oh, I'm not gonna give up my last cherry bomb unless one of you idiots, like, goes down the logging trail naked in that shopping cart. And Ig does it, but he goes down the trail and he hits his head on a log and almost drowns.
Yeah.
And Lee pulls him out of the river and saves his life. Yeah. And then he ends up getting the cherry bomb, even though he wasn't going to give it to him.
Yeah, because he wasn't technically fully naked. He had, like, socks and shoes and I think, like, underwear on.
Like tighty-whitey.
Yeah.
But Glenna makes him give it to him anyway.
Yeah.
And then Lee and Ig are hanging out and they're talking about Marin, and Lee offers to fix Marin's cross. And Ig is like, I wanted to give the cross back to her. So even though Lee is the one who fixed it, Lee's like, oh, what are you going to trade for it? And Ig trades the last cherry bomb for Marin's cross.
Right.
So Ig gives Marin her cross back, and then Terry runs up to them and is like, did you give Lee the last cherry bomb? And then we find out that it blew up in his hand.
Yeah.
This is something that is now especially irritating to me because I've read the book. In the book horns, his hand doesn't blow up. He's not holding it at all. And in the movie, his hand, well, he's holding the cherry bomb, and somehow the only damage that happens is that he loses his 2 middle fingers.
Yeah.
And it's basically, and I hinted a little bit before at how it gets a little heavy-handed with the devil symbolism and stuff. Not even symbolism at some points, it's just like throwing like devil imagery in your face.
Right.
And he loses his 2 middle fingers on one of his hands so he can make like the devil horns with his hand, which is fine, I guess. But in the book, he's blowing up a car and he doesn't think that the fuse went all the way. And so the car blows up while he's too close to it, and a shard of glass goes into his eye. So nothing happens with his hand at all. It's just his eye, and, like, none of that is mentioned in the movie. I don't know. I think visually the eye thing would have been freakier for me.
Right, same.
But I guess it would have been harder to pull off because they would have had to blow up a car.
Yeah.
There's a lot about Lee's character that's different that I'll talk about later because we gotta get through the summary, but then Ig is, like, really upset because he feels like they traded the cherry bomb for Marin. And Marin's like, no, Ig, I wanted you to get the cross and give it back to me. I didn't want Lee to do that. So they kiss. Very cute. Budding romance. And then he wakes up. There's a bone saw in his horn. And the doctor is having sex with the nurse and, like, getting high off the anesthesia.
What a thing to wake up to.
I know.
Yeah, then he goes to the graveyard and sees the priest and, like, gets out of the car and, like, yeah, and then the priest is, like, very upset that he's there. He's like, get away from me. And, yeah, and, like, Ig tries to ask him for help, like, how to get rid of his horns and stuff. The priest doesn't want to hear him or have anything to do with him. He's like, I can't help you. And, like, yeah, Ig's basically asking how to make them go away. He's saying, you know, he didn't kill Marin, which obviously the priest is very convinced that he did.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, like, they're in a small town, so everybody in the town is convinced that Ig is the one who killed Marin.
Right. They all know each other and, like, knew Marin and knew Ig and, like, everything.
Yeah, so the priest is very upset.
Yeah, he's saying that, like, Ig fell from grace forever. You know, like, there's no coming back from this. He's saying, like, all this stuff. He's like, you know, there's nothing I can do from you. Like, he's saying, like, you know, every devil was, like, originally, like, an angel and stuff. He was like, you know, Satan was cast to earth and, like, made to crawl like a snake and such. And so he's basically saying that, like, Ig has been cast out. Like, you know, God has turned his back on him. He's, you know, there's no helping him. He's saying there's no hope for him. And, like, Ig says, like, you know, that's all you can do. Like, there's nothing for me. And then, honestly, at that point, the priest, like, tells him to kill himself. And is like, you know, there's a rope over there.
Yeah, he's like, I can string you up for you. Or you can do it to yourself. Like, those are really the only two ways that you're going to get out of this.
Right.
So Ig has no help, like, anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after the scene with the priest, he bumps into Lee.
Yeah, who's, like, eating a sandwich.
Yeah, Lee, like, can't see the horns, and he's not confessing anything weird to Ig.
Right. And
Ig makes this comment that's like, oh, I guess the horns don't work on good people.
Yeah.
And then Ig goes to his parents' house. So he goes there kind of for sanctuary, like, because he's hoping that his parents, whatever they have to tell him is not going to be that freaky. Right. But his mom basically is like, I don't want you to be my son anymore. I'm sick of hearing about you and your problems. Like, I've had enough. I just want to, like, live my life, and I want you to be very far away so I never have to deal with this again. So obviously he's really shaken from that. And then his dad, he doesn't say anything to that level, but he is very upset, and, like, he loved Marin like a daughter. And he basically admits to being the one who causes the fire at the lab that has burned the samples from Marin's body.
Right.
And he was trying to do the right thing because he doesn't believe that Ig is innocent, but he's trying to protect him anyway because he's his dad.
Right.
And then he says that Marin was his favorite thing about Ig. And Ig is like, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So that's rough. So,
yeah, he also talks about how it was always hard to be, like, Ig's dad because he couldn't relate to him. But, like, he could always relate to Terry, because everybody likes to hear about how your parents can relate to your sibling, but not you. Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's also talking about how he was always really envious of Ig and Marin's relationship because he's never loved anyone the way that the two of them loved each other.
Mm-hmm. And how, like, I think he said that he could, like, understand that he did it for, like, love. Like, he loved her so much that, like, he thinks that Ig loved Marin so much that, like, that's why he somehow, like, that's why he did this or something.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up in the book a lot, too, is they keep saying, like, more people kill out of love than hate.
Right.
So after he leaves his parents' house, he calls Lee to let him know that his dad is the reason why the lab burned down. And Lee is kind of like, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Maybe this doesn't have to be a bad thing. Yeah. And Ig's kind of like, well, I've got a plan. So that's when he goes to the bar and then is harassed by all of the reporters who really want to get anything from Ig. They want any comment or anything. And he's like, all right, you guys all fight each other, and whoever wins will, like, get the scoop with me. And they all start wailing on each other while Personal Jesus by Marilyn Manson plays in the background.
The most iconic scene.
Honestly. He, like, walks through all of this, like, mess to the bar, where the bartender picks up a bat and, like, tries to beat him with it.
Yeah.
And then is like, you know what I really want to do? I want to burn this bar down and, like,
collect the insurance money.
Yeah. And then, you know, a ton of people around the room are, like, confessing their sins to Ig and all this stuff. But finally, one of them
says something useful.
Yeah, finally. He's like, oh, I know who the new witness is. It's that waitress at the diner that you and Marin ate at that night. And he's like, all right, thank you. And then they burn the bar down.
Yeah. He just pours out a whole bunch of alcohol, like, right on the bar and just, like,
and just lights
Lights
it
it
up.
on fire. Like, what a mood.
Ig goes back to his car and he has a smoke. And he smokes a lot throughout this movie and he has asthma.
Yeah.
So he's smoking the whole time despite the fact that he can't breathe very well. And then he sees, like, the ring box in his glove compartment, and it is another flashback, and you find out that he was going to propose to Marin. And they go to Eve's family diner, which conveniently has a giant red apple on it. Again, it's not very subtle.
Right. It's also funny because the ring looks like a big snake.
Yeah, it's like an Ouroboros.
Yeah, it's funny to me.
So he's about to propose with, like, a golden snake ring at Eve's family diner. And at the beginning of the movie, he says that she was his Garden of Eden.
Right.
So there are all of these, like, signs that are, like, pointing to that.
They're very much hitting you over the head with the biblical imagery.
Very, very much. And the book is kind of like that, too, but I think by nature of, like, literature, it just is more subtle because it's not literally showing it to you. Like,
right.
Some things you have to come to the conclusion of on your own.
Right, like a picture's worth 1,000 words, so to keep being shown that same picture,
right,
it's like, all right.
All right, we get it. Settle down.
We understand now.
So he goes to the diner, he's gonna propose to Marin, and, like, he immediately realizes that something's not right. And Marin says that she is moving to LA, and that she wants to break up so that they can see other people.
Right.
And they get into this huge fight, and Ig storms out and leaves. So he leaves, and then he goes off. I think he goes to the foundry, and he falls asleep in his car.
Right.
And then the cops knock on his window, and they're like, hey, were you with Marin last night? And he's like, oh God, like, whatever happened to her is my fault. So that's what they're saying is his confession.
Yeah, quote
unquote. Which obviously is not a true confession, because he's not saying I murdered her. He just, like, why else would a cop be knocking on your window?
Yeah.
So he's like, what happened to her? And
then
like,
asking about, like, her specifically.
Right. Yeah, so, you know, it's like right off the bat, they just assume that it's him.
Right. And the cop is Eric.
Oh, the cop is Eric.
Yeah.
So in the book, Eric's like a different thing. So I think that's why I'm getting it confused, because there's Eric, who is a security guard, but he's not one of the cops. There are two cops that are, like, bugging Ig, who there were, like, more kids in their friend group, basically.
Okay, well then they consolidated some kids into Eric.
Apparently.
Good old meatbag.
So then Ig goes back to the diner, because the flashback's over. We're back to Horn's Ig. Ig goes back to the diner, and he wants to talk to the waitress. And the waitress has been lying about Ig and is saying that, like, Marin left with him and that he's the one who killed Marin, and then he sodomized her corpse. And she basically admits that she just really wants to be famous, and that she knows that everybody loves a good sex murder, and, like, she just wants to be on the front page of all the magazines, and she wants to be the star witness and whatever.
Yeah, she's like, am I pretty enough for TV? I think I'm pretty enough. Like...
So then Ig goes to the jazz club where Terry plays, and Terry plays the trumpet. So then Ig is with Terry outside, and he touches Terry, and he realizes that Terry drove Marin home from the diner. So he easily could have testified and said, like, or not even testified, but, like, gone to the cops and been like, hey, Ig's innocent because I was the last person to see Marin alive.
Right.
Because I drove her home from the diner. But the reason he didn't do that is because he drove her to a certain point, and then she just was like, I need to get out of the car. So she got out of the car and ran into the woods, and then Terry fell asleep because he was drunk while he was driving. So he fell asleep, and then he woke up, and he was holding a rock and had, like, a ton of blood all over him.
Yeah.
And then he goes into the woods, and that's when he finds Marin dead. And then he takes the rock, wraps up in his shirt, and throws it in the Knowles River. So Ig now knows that Terry knew that Ig was innocent, and that he very well could have killed her because he doesn't have a memory of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he could have been, like, blackout drunk.
But then it flashes back to the bar, and now, like, the cops have showed up again.
Oh, yeah, okay, so this is... This is one of the funnier scenes in the movie, where it's, like, Eric and his partner... Oh, wait, that's not there yet, is it?
No, that's a little bit later, I think. This is just saying that he's, like, I guess technically a cross-county line, so he's, like, running from the
Arrested.
law. Yeah, so he's like, arrested.
So this isn't the scene I'm thinking of, but they are making jokes about, like, beating off to the thought of...
Yeah, each other. And they're like, haha.
And Ig's kind of like, what the hell is happening? So then he goes to jail, and then Lee bails him out.
Yeah. And that's when he finds the cross.
Yeah, he finds out that Lee has Marin's cross around his neck.
Yeah.
Okay, so he finds out that Lee has the cross around his neck, and Lee is like, this is my cross.
Yeah, he's like, it's not Marin's, it's mine. I've always had it.
And Ig's like, you really don't think I know Marin's cross? Like,
come on.
what is wrong with you? And then he's like, yeah, I was the one that Marin was leaving you for.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, she gave it to me, actually. We were having, like, an affair behind your back.
I'm trying to hold back, because there's so much about Lee I want to talk about.
That's a mood.
So then after that, Ig is, like, freaking out of his car, and then he goes to Dale's house, which is Marin's father. And Dale points a shotgun at him and is like, get off my property or I will kill you.
Right.
So that doesn't work. And he's basically, he only goes there to try and see if, like, Marin had talked to him at all about breaking up with him.
Right.
And Dale is like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you're asking me about my daughter? Like, don't talk to me about her? Ig then tries to, like, remove the horns himself, which, if a bone saw isn't gonna do it, like, what do you think you're gonna do that's gonna take those things off?
Right. I mean, you could always Hellboy those. File them down.
I mean, I guess. I guess he didn't try to do that.
Oh, he does sort of try to, like, scrape them off on that wall.
Oh, yeah.
Tries to, like, bend them off. Yeah. Funny thing about that.
But nothing works, because they're horns. This is also where all the snakes show up.
Yeah. Yeah, so the snakes show up, which is a weird time.
So this is when he walks by Eric and his cop partner in the car, and they threaten to arrest him, but Ig is like, wouldn't you rather just suck each other off right now? And they're both like, they're into each other. And they're like, yeah, that's why we keep wanting to be partners. And then they start making out and, like, go at it in the front seat of the cop car.
I think before that is he confronts the waitress again with the snakes and the weird pitchfork, right? Or is that after?
No, that's right after.
Okay.
So that's where Ig is headed to with the snakes.
His snake posse.
So he's got the snakes. The snakes are in the waitress's car. The waitress, I guess, is named Veronica. And they bite her, like, on her face and, like, on her neck and stuff. And
right. Yeah, he also has his little pitchforky.
Yeah, he has a pitchfork.
And, you know, just in case nobody knows by now. A lot of devil imagery.
He's a devil allegory. So.
Then he confronts Terry.
Yeah, then he goes back to see Terry. He still has the snake around his neck.
His new buddy.
He goes to find Terry, and Terry is just, like, doing a ton of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And Ig basically forces Terry to do, like, all the drugs he has and go on this crazy trip. And you think almost that he's trying to kill him.
Right.
But afterwards he's like, I feel really bad that I had to punish Terry, but the only way that I could help him was to get him to face his demons. And he basically knew that Terry felt so guilty about not doing anything for Ig and Marin that he, like, was doing drugs and he couldn't move past that traumatic event in his life.
Right.
Ig forced him to feel everything that Marin felt, like, during this trip.
Right.
And then left him there.
Yeah.
So he ends up in the hospital. And in this, like, summary that I'm looking at, it says Terry collapses, but Terry is sucked into the mossy earth by snakes.
It is a time.
It's really freaky, and it's not in the book at all. That whole scene is not in the book.
Well, that's comforting, because, like, Ig's face, like, does a weird thing where it, like, stretches, and then, like...
Oh, yeah.
It's such a weird time.
And the last pill that Terry takes is shaped like a little devil.
Of course it is.
With horns. Yeah, like, again...
Right. That's the one he, like, places on his tongue, right?
Yeah.
They're really hitting you over the head with this stuff.
They really are, and I don't think I noticed it all the first time I watched it.
Right.
Because, I mean, you're not really paying attention to that, because you're trying to figure out who killed Marin.
Right.
With Ig, and then, I don't know, this is probably, like, the 5th or 6th time that I've rewatched this, and I've been like, oh my god, like...
Yeah, it's so prevalent. Even in their color choices, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's riding around in a red 1972 AMC Gremlin. It's called a Gremlin.
Course, a Gremlin. of all things.
Like, there are so many things.
Yeah, a lot of his clothes are red.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of his clothes are red. And shirts, and, like, they're always, like, the most prominent color. Like, they kind of, like, downplay the other colors, I feel like.
Yep.
Very fun.
So then, after the whole thing with Terry, Ig meets up with Lee down by the docks again. And Ig takes Lee's necklace, or Marin's necklace. And then Lee can finally see Ig's horns.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of admits, but Ig touches him and sees that Lee is the one who killed Marin.
Right.
And Marin... So, I mean, we see, like, all of Lee's memories with Ig. We see that Marin and Lee met up, and Marin was saying that she couldn't marry Ig, and she found out something about herself over the summer, and she couldn't marry Ig anymore. And Lee is basically picking up on all of these, like, signals that he thinks that Marin is giving him that aren't actually there.
Right.
Then Lee is, like, waiting outside the diner for Marin to break up with Ig. And he, like, follows Terry's car to the woods, and he then follows Marin into the woods. And he makes a move on her, and she's like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And this is where it devolves into the rape and murder scene.
Yeah.
Which, I will say, to the film's credit, is not as graphic as other scenes in horror movies of similar types.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many, like, gory murder scenes in horror films that I think a lot of us are kind of immune to that by now, but rape scenes especially get really touchy. And this is still, like, more graphic than I would prefer, but it's definitely not drawn out. And I don't think it needed to be shown necessarily, but it wasn't shown in a way that was, like, sexualized or romanticized at all.
Right.
Like, they're really portraying it as an act of violence from Lee to Marin, because Marin is like, "I would never leave Ig for you. Like, why don't you understand that?" And then Lee just kind of snaps and, like, goes after her.
Yeah.
So then at this point, Ig knows who killed Marin. He knows what happened, and he goes after Lee, and he's really pissed about it, obviously.
Right.
So Lee and Ig have a fight, and then Lee starts beating him with this chain.
Mm-hmm.
And then he basically puts him in his gremlin and sets the gremlin on fire.
Right.
Again, this is all very heavy-handed, like, hell, devil, fire symbolism.
Yeah, they also show, though, that, like, while they're fighting, like, they do a couple more flashes back to that night, and they do show that Lee is the one that put the bloody rock in Terry's car, because Terry left it unlocked, and then rubbed all the blood on Terry's clothes, so that, if anything, Terry would be blamed for it.
Right.
But anyway, then he puts Ig in the car and sets it on fire.
Lee, like, douses the whole car in kerosene.
Yeah.
And then lights it on fire. And then Ig... I don't know if he drives himself. I don't remember if he drives himself or if Lee pushes him in the car. But the car goes into the river from there.
Right.
And obviously the fire goes out because it was in the river. And then Lee comes forward to the police and is like, "Oh, Ig confessed to me. And he said that he killed Marin, and then he killed himself."
Right.
But there wasn't a body found in the car.
Right.
So then Ig comes out of the water, and he's all burned up, and he's got much bigger horns now.
Yeah.
And he's, like, he's burnt, but he's alive.
Right.
And then he goes back to Marin's dad's house. And Marin's dad is like, "Okay, I know you didn't kill Marin, but you know who did it, didn't you?" But Ig doesn't want Dale to get into any trouble.
Right.
So... then Dale gives Ig the key that Marin wanted him to have.
Right.
And he lets Ig keep her cross. And he puts her cross around his neck, and then he loses his horns. And he, like, gains his humanity back, and he's back to normal. It doesn't look like he was burnt. It doesn't look like anything happened at all.
Right.
So Ig goes to the treehouse with the key and opens up a box, and the box inside has a note from Marin that's all written in Morse code.
Right.
And basically in the note, Marin says that she has breast cancer.
Right.
Or in the book, it's breast cancer. I think in this, she just says she has cancer.
Right.
But it's the kind of cancer that killed her mom.
Right.
And she saw what it did to her dad, and she doesn't want to do that to Ig. And so she's never breaking up with Ig because she wants to break up with Ig. She's breaking up with Ig because she doesn't want him to feel trapped, and, like, she doesn't want him to lose himself trying to fight her cancer with her.
Right.
And, like, she didn't want to tell Ig because Ig would have only wanted to marry her, like, more than he already did, and he would have wanted her to fight, and he would have fought for her, and she says, like, she would have gone through hell and died anyway.
Right.
So she didn't see a point to, like, putting Ig through that.
Right. And also, like, I think they wanted to, like, leave the town and such. Like, they had dreams and stuff that were elsewhere, and she didn't want him to have to stay here and be stuck here trying to help her when they wanted to go to California together or whatever it was and do all these things. And
yeah, that's the other weird thing is that Ig is, like, working at the radio station in this.
Yeah.
But in the book, like, he is, he's, like, a professor.
Mm.
And he's about to go to Britain when all of this goes down for, like, a very prestigious program. And Marin is studying to be a doctor.
Aw.
So I don't know why they changed their careers. I don't know, like, what the importance was of that. Just seems like a weird thing to, like, switch around.
Right.
So then after the treehouse thing, Ig visits Terry in the hospital, and he's finally lucid and able to talk. Terry is saying that he's really sorry about what happened, and that he won't leave Ig again. He's not gonna let Ig face Lee alone. Like, he just wants to be there for Ig. And Ig is kind of insistent that it's just him who goes.
Right.
And meets up with Lee.
Which, like, you know, Terry's not in the best shape.
Yeah, not in good shape. Like, the hospital would not have released him, probably. But Ig goes to Lee's house from there and is like, oh, just come and I'll walk with me. Like, just a walk.
Right.
And he's trying to get Lee to admit to what he did to Marin. Because he wants to experience humanity. He wants to be a good man. He wants to be the man that Marin wanted him to be. And so he's giving Lee the chance to do the right thing and say, I did this, and then, like, turn himself over to the police. What they don't know is that Terry talked to the police. So Terry and Eric show up, and Eric is like, well, you said that Ig confessed and then killed himself, and he's obviously still alive, so what else are you lying to me about?
Right.
There's a confrontation, and then Lee gets a hold of Eric's gun and shoots him, which is really sad.
It is really sad.
And very graphic.
Yeah. Like, his whole head just, like a watermelon.
Pops.
It really
off.
does. It is just...
Almost freakier than that, too, is he shoots Terry, like, through the leg.
Yeah.
And he's, like, gushing blood. So then Ig still has the fucking pitchfork. Ig tries to grab the shotgun out of Lee's hand. Ig and Lee now are, like, the only two able-bodied people who are left to, like, struggle with each other.
Right.
And Ig pulls off his necklace, and he suddenly grows wings. Like, these big white wings, and he, like, flies up into the air, and then they burn off. And finally he completes his, like, full transformation into the devil.
Right.
I can assume.
Yeah. With, like, the biggest horns ever.
Yeah, these big, like, round horns. Well, not round, they're, like, curved. And he's, like, not human at all anymore. Like, he looks like...
A big magma person.
Yeah, like magma. Like, he looks like hot coals or something.
Yeah. Like, all crackly.
So then Lee's still shooting at him. And this all happens really quickly. Like, the climax of this film feels like, compared to the rest of it,
Yeah.
it feels like it's very sudden.
It's crazy. But yeah, Lee shoots at him till he runs out of bullets. Because it's a big shotgun, so it's like, you know.
Yeah, there's, like, not a lot
Yeah.
in there.
And then, I think he gets him with the snakes, right?
So, before the snakes thing, Ig, like, charges at Lee and catches him with his horn. So he, like, impales him on his horn.
Right.
And then kind of, like, tosses him to the side. And then the snakes come by, and they all, like, are wrapped around him.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, they emphasize, like, that Lee is terribly afraid of snakes.
Oh, okay.
He's, like, deeply, deeply afraid of snakes. So that's why, like, the end of this is so poignant, is because the snake, like, crawls into his mouth.
Right. I also forgot that he, like, picked up Ig's pitchfork and, like, stabbed Ig, like, right before that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he, like, leaks a whole bunch of, like, lava out of him before impaling Lee with his horn, and then the snakes.
And then the snakes.
The snakes get so gross.
Yeah, that is really gross.
Goes into his stomach through the gut wound. Nasty.
But then Lee dies, and Ig, whose whole purpose, like, he has the horns because he's trying to avenge Marin. He's trying to see who killed her. And because he's fulfilled his purpose, he turns to stone.
Mm-hmm.
So Ig dies.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And in the book, and I know I keep, like, bringing up the book, and it's a horror movie review symbolism podcast, but in the book, they keep saying how Marin was, like, abandoned by God. So they're like, she went to church every Sunday, she wore a cross, she prayed every night,
mm-hmm.
and it didn't matter, because he still, like, abandoned her and left her alone to die in the dirt. This is basically saying that, like, the devil picked up the slack,
right.
because karmically, like, justice still needed to be paid off somehow. So the devil is doing the dirty work, and he is, like, avenging Marin.
Right.
So Ig has fulfilled that purpose and then dies. And then the film ends with the opening scene of Ig and Marin under the tree, which symbolically, like, we can assume that means that in death, like, they're finally united again in heaven or wherever they may be.
Yeah, it's a long movie.
It is. Yeah, okay, so that's the other thing. The runtime for this movie is just under 2 hours. Like, I think it's 1 hour and 59 minutes, which is very long.
Yeah, it's crazy long.
But again, they had a lot that they had to accomplish with the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily the best book-to-film adaptation. I like it both as a movie and as a book. But as a movie based on the book, they could have done a lot differently, and they could have elaborated on a lot of things that they just
didn't
left out.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know, I go back and forth. There are some things that they really drive home in the book that I feel like are, like, now that I've read it, are missing from the movie.
Right.
But it's hard, because the movie's 2 hours, and the book is, like, 370 pages-ish. But the average person reads that in, like, 13 hours.
Right.
So you're talking about, like, 13 hours of information versus 2 hours of information, which is really not a lot.
Yeah.
Like, as far as adaptations go, this isn't bad.
Yeah, definitely not.
But they do leave a lot out.
Right.
The biggest thing is Lee's character is, like, completely wrong. So Lee in the book is a congressman, he's not a lawyer. So he's not a lawyer at all.
Mm-hmm.
He still has all of his fingers. But they do make note that his eye from the glass being embedded in it was all smoky and, like, wrong. Like, they kind of refer to it as, like, his ghost eye or his dead eye.
Mm-hmm.
And they also really get into how Lee is a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
Which they kind of do in this, but I feel like in the movie it could be misread as just this kind of nice guy attitude.
Right.
Where he thought that he was going to get the girl and then he didn't, so he got pissed off and, like, enacted his revenge on her.
Right.
Where in the book, like, it's that a little bit, but they really go into detail with how, like, his mother was dying of dementia and he used that as an excuse to torture his mother to see, like, how much he could get away with without killing her.
Oh.
Yeah, like, he, like, turns up the heat in just her room in the middle of the summer and piles blankets on her and, like, forces her to, like, smell the, like, wet sheets that she went to the bathroom on.
Ew.
Like, he does all of this horrible stuff to her because she has dementia and he knows that, like, he can get away with it.
Right.
But at the same time, he's telling all of his friends that, like, he's her primary caretaker.
Yeah. So
he has all of these, like, sociopathic tendencies. So he's got that with his mom, but the book doesn't have, like, the book is like a third-person omniscient narrator.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get to listen to, like, all of their thoughts, kind of.
Okay. Or
you get some kind of insight to what they're doing or thinking. And so we get to see how Lee is, like, misinterpreting all of Marin's signals to him.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a closer look on how it got misinterpreted and how every little thing he's taking really personally. And, like, they kind of explain it away. They don't explain it away. They explain it. They basically say that when he was younger, he was, like, impaled. He fell off a fence and was impaled on a pitchfork that, like, went through his skull.
Because, of course, it had to be a pitchfork.
Of course it was the pitchfork. And that he was different after that. He had brain damage and he just wasn't. He was never the same after that. But after that happens, he, like, kills a cat.
Fun.
And then goes on to do, like, all of this other horrible stuff. And in this, like, he's kind of a crooked lawyer, but he's not, like, I don't know, like I said, they kind of explain it away like, oh, he was just mad because he didn't get the girl, but it's not that, like, he's a sociopath in the book.
Right.
As far as symbolism goes, we honestly could even just, like, start with their names.
Yeah, true.
Because the main character's name is Ignatius Martin Parrish.
Yeah.
So Ignatius literally means fiery one. It's from the Latin root ignis, which means fire. So it's like the same root as ignite. And then perish is to suffer death, typically in a violent, sudden, or untimely way.
Yeah.
So his name literally means death by fire. So Marin's name is Marin Williams, and the Williams part could be anything, so I didn't write that down as particularly important, but Marin is named after Father Marin from The Exorcist. So he's the older of the two priests. And Marin dies suddenly during the exorcism.
Right.
And that's a movie also that is super heavy with, like, Christian imagery. The other thing is the actress that they got to play Marin Williams, so Juno Temple, she was actually in a movie called Atonement, which I don't know if you've ever seen. But she also plays a girl in that who is sexually assaulted.
Fun.
Yeah, so she just has been, like, typecast as that since she was, like, a little kid.
Yeah.
And then Lee Torno is, like, a luxury watch dealer. And he kind of decides the untimely, like, demise of Marin.
Right.
So that one's a little bit of a stretch. But the name Lee, like, in the Bible, a Lee is, as a verb, it's to lie or speak falsely. But it's also, like, of or pertaining to the part or side opposite to that against which the wind blows. So it's literally, like, Lee's name basically means the opposite of Ig. Like, he's the opposing force to Ig.
Right.
So, right, like, just from the names alone, we already have, like, all of these clues as
right
to what's about to happen. I'm sure you could go through, like, everybody's names and find something.
Yeah.
But that would take forever, so I think just the top 3 main characters is about right. But it's also, like, a lot of movies or books will have, like, a Christ allegory, but Daniel Radcliffe in this is the Antichrist allegory. I mean, not even... you can't even call him an allegory because he literally grows wings and then falls from grace.
Right. He's definitely the devil.
Yeah. I mean, they hit you over the head with it
so many times.
Just non-stop. It's like, it's constant.
Yeah.
I mean, the devil thing, but also just, like, religious symbols in general.
Yeah. Like, you know, what is it? The diner, Eve's.
Oh, yeah, Eve's Diner with the big apple.
Big apple. Like, come on. The snake ring, like...
The snake ring. And he literally says that she's his Garden of Eden.
Yeah. His Garden of Eden, and he's like, oh, no one's born evil, the devil himself was a fallen angel, all kinds of stuff. It's really fun. Some of the, like, one of the people protesting him, like, you know, like one of the angry mob ladies, she's like, oh, like, you should ask God to save your soul for what you did to her, to which he replies, you know, I should ask the devil to punish whoever killed her. Like, there's so much behind it. Like, there's so much. Even just, like, the snakes that follow him, like, the pitchfork, like...
Oh, yeah. I mean, so they get to his parents' house. He gets to his parents' house, and one of their license plates says Gen 138.
Yeah.
They have, like, Bible verses on the license plates. And, like, this is the kind of thing that I usually really like in movies. And if it was, like, just the license plate, or, like...
things that subtle, like, that level of subtle. Like, I liked the, diner name. I thought that was a fun shout-out. But, like, I feel like there's so much of it.
Yeah, like, the diner name, I think, would have been okay for me if it was just the name. But, like, the diner name on the big neon red apple...
right.
Was a little much. And, like, if it was just the license plate and it said, like in the book, the cherry bombs are called Eve's cherry bombs. It's not Eve's Diner.
Yeah.
The reference to Eve is that it's Eve's cherry.
Yeah.
Which is, like, her innocence, which is what she loses when she is tempted by the snake and she eats the apple. Right. So it's just, I really appreciate little subtle things like that. So... again, the license plate, which it says Gen 138, which is Genesis 138. And that says, so Abram said to the Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. And Genesis is the first book of the Old Testament.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Because they all fight through this whole movie. And I feel like there could have been a lot of other verses that they put in there. Like, if they were gonna go that route, if they picked a verse about Lucifer falling from grace,
right,
I feel like that would have been, I mean, again, on the nose, but a little bit more appropriate, because I think your average person wouldn't have seen the license plate and been like, oh, Gen 138, I know what that is.
Right.
Because I didn't. Also, one of the biggest symbols that keeps popping up in here and is almost subtle is baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's two big scenes that I can think of where Ig ends up submerged in water and then comes back.
Right.
And that is the flashback where he is at the foundry and he almost drowns and Lee pulls him out. And then there's when Lee sets him on fire and pushes him into the river and then he pulls himself out. And those two scenes also are foils to each other, because in one, Ig almost drowns and it's because he got himself into trouble, but Lee pulls him out. And in the other, Lee is trying to kill him and then Ig saves himself.
Right.
But functionally, in literature and in movies like this, when characters are fully submerged in water, especially in movies that have such heavy Christian imagery, it's just baptism. Like, it's about rebirth. It's about cleanliness and, like, removing your sins. And in the beginning, when he almost drowns and then comes back, he tells Marin that Lee is actually the one who fixes her cross.
Right.
And, like, gets that off his chest. So he's getting this, like, clean start with her. And he's starting his relationship with her. And that is, like, this big section of the rest of his life until we know him.
Right.
But then this is, like, he's not clean of his sins, but he is reborn. And in the book, when he goes through this scene where he's, like, set on fire and then goes into the water, his asthma's gone when he comes out.
Mm.
And they kind of show it here, too, because they show him using his inhaler a couple times.
Right.
And then he never uses it again.
Right.
So it's just that, like, going in and then coming out clean. Like, going in and then coming out transformed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing from the book that is really different is that, and this goes back to Lee being a sociopath, is that Ig almost drowns, but Ig pulls himself out in the book. And then he still has a ton of water in his lungs, and he almost dies anyway. But there's a snake next to him, and Lee kicks it because he hates snakes, and he accidentally kicks Ig's back, and Ig throws up the water.
Oh my god.
But Ig doesn't remember pulling himself out.
Mm-hmm.
So in this movie, because Ig is both, like, an antichrist symbol, but in some ways he's also, like, an allegory for Christ, because he dies, and then he comes back, and he has this ultimate betrayal with his best friend, and then he has to, like, save himself from that betrayal.
It's funny because I feel like that's, you know, also very allegorical to, like, Satan and the devil in, you know, obviously in the Bible, because he was, you know, God's best friend. He was God's best angel, number one, and then fell from grace and was remade into, you know, what he is.
Right.
But yeah.
Let's, one of the characters in the book makes this observation of, like, I don't know why everybody thinks of God and Satan as opposites, because, like, God hates sin, and Satan punishes sinners, right. So aren't they really fighting on the same side? Like,
yeah. They work together, technically. In that sense, anyway.
Right.
Yeah. I did also think it's funny that there is a lot of, like, symbols for rebirth and, you know, baptism. And, like, I know I keep coming back to this with the stupid phoenix tattoo on Glenna's back, but, like, I thought that was pretty interesting, especially because phoenixes are reborn in fire.
Right.
And I thought that was pretty interesting, too.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with fire. I mean, he comes out of the fire scene and he's all red.
Right.
So he's a red devil, and, like, his horns get bigger, and he's got the pitchfork.
Yeah.
You mentioned, like, the cartoon, like, the Looney Tunes cartoon.
Right.
In the book, like, there's one scene where he comes across, like, Glenna's underwear, and it has little devils printed on it.
Of course.
Yeah, like, the book's not exempt from it.
Right.
Like, they both have all of these, like, in-your-face kind of things.
Yeah, I do think it is interesting. I almost feel like the the treehouse is almost like their own little like Garden of Eden rather than like Marin herself, like just from the way they always like show it in such like it's such a happy innocent place, like they hang out there, they've hung out there their whole lives, it's their whole relationship is that, and then it was soiled by Lee, by what he did underneath it. So I thought that was a pretty interesting like observation, I guess.
So the treehouse, I kept getting confused about the treehouse in the movie because it's an actual treehouse in the movie.
Right.
In the book, it is a treehouse, but they call it the treehouse of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows up once when they're younger. They kind of happen upon it, and they go inside and they fool around and like they pray together in the treehouse, but they can never find it again.
Mm-hmm.
Like it never existed. So the rape and murder of Marin doesn't happen under the treehouse. It happens under this old like cherry tree that is near the foundry.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the book, Ig like ends up in the treehouse, and Marin's waiting for him there.
Aw.
So he goes searching for it. He can never find it again until the end.
I feel like that's an even bigger like symbolic like relation to the Garden of Eden, because it's almost like they're cast out when they do lose their innocence by inevitably growing up, and then they're able to find it again after
like in death.
The fact, yeah. So I feel like it definitely reads better in that sense.
I think it reads better. I understand visually why that would be really confusing.
Right.
Because they'd have to keep saying, like, oh, they never found the treehouse again. And, like,
yeah.
They do that in the book, but in 2 hours of movie, how often can you say, like, oh, and we never found the treehouse again? Like,
right.
So there's that. There's, like, all of the sins that everybody's admitting to Ig.
Yeah.
Which some are worse than others. And one of my favorite quotes from this film is like, if you have to sin, you just gotta pick the one you can live with. Like, sometimes you can't do the right thing, you just have to pick the sin you can live with.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty accurate, honestly, because no one's doing the right thing 100% of the time, and like...
Yeah.
somebody's always gonna get hurt by, like, the right thing.
Yeah.
So...
at the end of the day, you do what you can live with.
Yeah. I mean, and some of the sins were definitely worse than others.
Right.
Snakes.
Yeah, snakes. Snake ring.
Snake ring.
Hiss.
I mean, the drugs, like...
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that, Terry specifically plays, like, the trumpet of, like, all things.
Which is a horn.
Yeah, exactly. Of course.
And
very
that,
angel-y imagery.
It's angel-y, but it's funny because Jazz is, like...
Right.
Not angel-y.
And also he was doing a ton of drugs.
Yeah, so he's, like... I don't know, he's doing all of these, like, awful things alongside that.
Right. I also do like, though, that, like, out of everything that happened, and even though he didn't, like, tell Ig right away about what had happened, like, he genuinely cares about and, like, he loves Ig. He loves his brother. He really does. And, I think that's a pretty interesting thing, considering how his parents feel.
Yeah. The parenting was rough.
That was really rough.
And especially because, like, right off the bat, before he even has the horns, they don't assume that he's innocent.
Right.
They're just like, we're just gonna protect you because you're our son.
Yeah.
Like, they think he's guilty, too. They don't, like, hide the fact that they think he's guilty.
Right.
But, again, in the book, like, this is all happening a year after the fact.
Right.
So they're...
not in the midst of all of it.
Right. They're coming up on 1 year since Marin died. So there aren't news fans following him around. Terry has been hiding his guilt for a year, not just a couple of days or weeks, or I don't know how long it is exactly in the movie, but it can't have been very long.
Yeah.
Because news reporters are still, like, flocking around.
Yeah.
And they haven't even, like, had a trial yet or anything, and Lee is still giving him advice.
Right. Where does this take place again?
It's a town called Gideon, but I can't remember what state it's in.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Northeast.
Hmm.
Because in the book, they keep talking about how they're only, like, 45 minutes from New Hampshire.
Hmm.
But also, Marin is going to school in Boston.
Okay.
In the book.
Right.
Oh, there's also when, the doctor is, like, looking at the horns, and he goes, do they hurt? And Ig is like, yes, like hell.
Right.
And the doctor just, like, laughs.
Me. I do like, in Heroes, the specific, like, lines that they have with, like, the imagery of, like, Marin dancing and everything. We're like, as it fades, like the memory fades, it's to the line that, though nothing will keep us together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is another thing, is that Hero, obviously it's Heroes by David Bowie that's
right
playing in the movie. But in the book, it's like the Rolling Stones and AC/DC.
Really?
Yeah. Like, at the beginning of the book, in Morse code, it's a line from Sympathy for the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
It starts and ends with, like, a line from that in Morse code.
I love that.
And then, I don't know if because the Rolling Stones is such an important part in the book for them. It's like that song, and then, like, Can't Always Get What You Want is something that Marin and Ig keep, like, saying to each other. And they say it about the treehouse, too, where they're like, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying that, like things in the Bible, that the treehouse showed up to them when they needed it.
Right.
And then didn't again because they didn't need it until they were dead, and then they needed each other.
Right.
I can't help but wonder if they just couldn't get the rights to the Rolling Stones music.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's because by this point, like, so many horror movies use Sympathy for the Devil.
I was gonna say, I'm like...
in their soundtrack.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that could have something to do with it.
Mm-hmm. I do think this is I think it is a good choice, though, for what they have, like what they've lined it up with.
Yeah, I mean, if you gave me a choice between the Rolling Stones and David Bowie, I would pick David Bowie every time.
Right.
But as far as, like, lyrical content, it's dicey. I mean, they kind of got away with it because they put in, like, Personal Jesus.
Right, yeah.
in the middle there.
That's true.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about.
I don't feel like there is. At least nothing of, like, importance, I don't think. Like, there's a couple of things. Like, there's some very early, I guess, foreshadowing. When she says, like, he says, like, I'm gonna love you for the rest of my life, and Marin's like, just love me for the rest of mine, and it's like, yeah, obviously. Clearly she is not going to make it.
Well, then, like, all of the foreshadowing with, like, Ig in the river.
Right.
Ig almost drowns in the river, and then later he almost drowns in the river. And in the book, Ig and Lee have a conversation where they're like, what do you think is the worst way to die?
Mm-hmm.
And Ig is saying, I think drowning would be the worst way to die. But Lee is like, burning car, because he almost died from the car exploding. But Ig almost died from drowning.
Right, so, like, obviously.
And then at the end of the book, Ig almost dies from being burned alive in a car and then drowning. So, again, it's not, like, the most subtle thing.
Right.
I don't think it's a bad movie. I still like it for what it is.
Yeah.
I have, like, a weird thing for Daniel Radcliffe, which is strange because I never liked him as Harry Potter, so I don't know where that came from.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something about him being older.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean,
and, like...
yeah, he's not a kid anymore.
Yeah. And neither are we. Ha
ha. Oh, the other thing. The waitress.
Mm-hmm.
The waitress in the movie. In the book, they describe her as looking like the professor from Harry Potter who is always harassing Harry Potter. And then they're like, Professor Snail or something.
I love that.
So it's just funny to me that they, like, actually said Harry Potter in the book, and then Daniel Radcliffe was playing Ig.
That's hilarious.
Which was supposed to be Shia LaBeouf, which I told you yesterday, and then they, like, fired him so Daniel Radcliffe could play Ig instead. That's
hilarious. I also think it's funny that they, like, specifically reference, like, Snape, because he's a Slytherin teacher, and of course that has to do with more snakes, so...
Well... That's why I said earlier, like, I have a Slytherin thing, and I almost forgot.
Oh my god. Amazing.
Not forget. What were you going to say before I went on my Snape tangent?
Probably just, like, scruffy, grungy, washed-up Daniel Radcliffe with, like, big-ass horns on his face. What a tasty man.
I mean... Oh, well, the other thing, too, is, what can Harry Potter do in Harry Potter?
Right.
He speaks parcel tongue. He speaks to snakes. Like, this is all...
amazing.
They did this on purpose.
I cannot believe, but also I super can.
I mean, as far as the movie goes, like, some of the shots were okay, but I wasn't, like, crazy impressed with the cinematography. I don't know. If I had to give this movie a rating, like, out of 10, I'd say it's probably about a 7 for me.
That's fair.
Like, it's not perfect, but, like, I'll still watch it, and it's one of those movies that I would choose to watch again.
Yeah.
But it's not, there are a lot of things that I would change after it, and there are a lot of things I would change about it, and I really do think that, like, the heavy-handedness of the Christian imagery gets a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Like, it's almost like they're trying to make up for the fact that it's sort of lazy storytelling.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of just relying on you to be like, oh, well, he's got horns, so everything makes sense.
Right.
And then throw all this, like, Christian and devil imagery in your face and hope that something sticks.
Right. It is also interesting, like, now that you've mentioned that Lee he's got one, dead eye, and they keep bringing up that, like, God turned a blind eye to Marin.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's pretty interesting, at least for the book, obviously, because he is not missing an eye in the movie.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean with, like, lazy storytelling and kind of lack of subtlety.
Yeah.
Which is really frustrating because there's a lot of things that they did really well in the book, and I really do understand that there are a lot of things that visually would not have made sense. Like, they wouldn't have translated over well. I do understand that for the purpose of storytelling in a movie, you can't include a lot, but they should have developed Lee's character more.
Right.
Because we really don't see him much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a shame.
It is a shame because I feel like they could have, at least given us something. Like, give us flashbacks of him. I mean, not that I like seeing animal abuse in movies, but give us, like, him torturing animals or him, like, playing with fire.
Right. Like, as a hint.
Yeah, like, all of these things that are textbook sociopathic behavior. I mean, not that, like, a normal person doesn't just snap and, like, rape and kill somebody. That's very, like, incel behavior.
Yeah.
And in the book, they talk about how Lee is, like, a very conservative, Republican, Christian family man. So they really are, like, hitting you over the head with all this stuff.
Right.
But I think they just do a better job with, like, the characterization of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got this, like, this is something I forgot to mention, but he's got this, Lolita complex.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where he's in love with Marin because she's pure.
Right.
And he's got this, like, in the book, this weird obsession with, like, virginal women.
Innocence and, yeah.
Yeah, and innocence, and, like, he's, like, having sex with Glenna, but he's like, oh, but she's garbage. I'm not attracted to her. I just can get off with her.
Mm-hmm.
But he's in love with Marin because she's pure and she's never, like, been naked in front of a guy, and, like, she presents herself in a certain way and doesn't have tattoos and, like, all this stuff. And then as he gets older, he never, like, dates anybody else. Like, he's really stuck on Marin. And when Ig can finally touch him and, like, get him to admit his sins when he doesn't have the cross anymore, he's like, I really want to get with this 14-year-old girl who's my neighbor, who reminds me of Marin.
Ew.
And he's talking to Ig, and he's like, do you think I should do it?
Ugh.
Yeah. So they don't go into any of this stuff, which I think it could have helped, like, really hammer home that he's not a good person. Like, he's not, like, a nice lawyer and Ig's best friend who suddenly went bad one day. Like, he's always been bad, but sociopaths are good at pretending that they're good and pretending that they fit in.
Right.
Not that that has anything to do with symbolism. That's just, like...
Right. But no, they definitely could have taken some of that time dedicated to throwing in very obvious symbolism and, dedicated more of that time and energy into developing, like, Lee's character or something. Or at least some of the flashbacks, because there was a lot of flashbacks, and, a lot of it was important, but then there was a lot of, like, I don't know, I feel like there could have been some better use of the time there, I think. At least to just show one or two things with Lee's, like, background. Like, it didn't have to be everything, but, like, throw us a bone, like,
Right, yeah. I mean, so the diner doesn't exist at all in the book.
Right, you mentioned that, I think.
They're, like, at a bar.
Yeah.
So, it's just, like, I don't know, like I said, it's a little heavy-handed. Like, I think I would have liked it more if it was Eve's Cherry Bombs.
Right.
Instead of Eve's Family Diner with the big
apple.
Yeah,
big app.
And, like, Marin's cross is really important, so that has to be there.
Right.
But the other big thing in the book is that Marin's mom never died.
Really?
It's her sister. And she doesn't have a sister in the movie. And this is another one of those things where I'm like, I know why they had to cut things out, and they have to condense, basically, so that they can tell the story and not focus on all these side characters.
Right.
Because, again, you have 2 hours of movie versus 13 hours on average of reading. So you're cutting out a lot. But Marin's sister had an extreme form of breast cancer that kills her in about 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she was engaged, and then she became so awful and, like, so sick that she just pushed everyone away. And Marin didn't want that to happen with Ig, and so she decided that she wasn't going to go through with chemo.
Mm-hmm.
So her whole reason for breaking up with Ig was that, like, she knew that Ig was going to want her to fight, and she didn't want to fight it. She just wanted to die without the chemo, without the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to die herself rather than die like someone that no one knew.
Right.
And so, instead of the graveyard scene with the priest, Ig visits Father Mold in the church,
Mm-hmm.
and he admits that him and Marin's mom are having an affair.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's like the whole... I know, there's like so much stuff going on, and like everyone in the town is being sinful and is admitting to all of these sins.
Right.
But I don't think the priest admits to any sins in the movie.
No, I don't think so. The only one would be that
He just says he wants to kill...
Yeah, to kill Ig, and that's
right.
really it.
Which, like, everyone in the town wants to kill Ig because they all think that he killed Marin, so that's not really special.
Yeah, it's like, big deal. I've heard that.
No, and I'm sure that somebody who was well-versed in Christianity could do a better job at, like, picking up on maybe even more subtle symbols that I'm not picking up on.
Yeah, I mean...
I grew up Christian, but not, like, super Christian.
I mean, I was raised Catholic. Like, I went to church every Sunday. I did confession. I received communion. I was confirmed. I have a confirmation name. I got to do the crowning of Mary, which is a very big honor, let me tell you. Like, ask any Catholic. The crowning of Mary, like, if you get to do that, if you have, like, a statue of Mary at your church and you get to put the crown of flowers on her head in, like, May, that's a big deal. Like, trust me, I was the first to learn all of my prayers in, like, my... the year that I received communion. I learned all my prayers first, so I got a prize, actually. They gave me 2 little pearl earrings for learning them all first, and I wore them to my communion. So, like, at least for somebody who didn't go to, like, Catholic school, but I went to, like, CCD and, like, things like that, like,
right.
I grew up very Catholic. I think we got most of the big things anyway. Anything important that I feel like anyone will notice, but...
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Christian. I went to school... I mean, I went to Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
And I also went to church. But it's been so long.
That's true.
And I think, fortunately, here, a lot of the stuff that they're hitting you over the head with is stuff that most people, even if they aren't Christian, have heard about.
Right. I feel like that is why they do, like, oversaturated with so much imagery of, like, what is very obviously, like... Christian, related things.
Right. They're probably just trying to make sure that it's universal, which I understand to an extent.
Right. But, like, it is a bit much. Like, who knows if it's just because we did grow up, like, these sorts of ways that it is a lot to us, but...
Right, because somebody else who grew up removed from Christianity might be like, oh, I'm glad they put all this stuff in here because... I actually knew what they were talking about, or like I picked up on it because there was so much of it.
Right. I'd like to have, like, if I can convince Jordan to watch it because he's, half Jewish, half Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
But grew up raised Jewish.
Right.
I think it would be interesting for me to hear his perception of it.
Right. I mean, Mark grew up Catholic, but he did not retain like anything from the church, and now he's like a diehard atheist.
That's a mood.
So I think I did show him this movie,
mm-hmm.
and he did miss a lot of the like religious symbols that were kind of going on in it. But some of them are hard to catch.
That's fair. Like
on a first watch.
That's definitely. I mean, I feel like a lot of them did jump out to me like at first, but it's hard to say that now because I've watched it a couple of times. But like,
yeah, and it was years ago that we saw it.
Yeah, and so like it is hard to say that, but like I don't know, a lot of them feel very obvious. Like, you know what I mean? Like honestly, I only have like 2 pages of notes here on the first 10 minutes of the movie, and the rest of it I have just kind of been bullshitting. So, like, everything else from that is just, what I remember as, being very obviously, like, Christian symbol. So, like...
Right.
That doesn't tell you much.
I mean, it's a lot.
It's a lot. They definitely hit you over the head with it, like, again and again, which, for some people, like us, is very too much. But, like, for Mark or for Jordan or someone, who didn't grow up with it or didn't retain a lot of it, it might be very helpful for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark did miss some of it, but I definitely remember him kind of, like, rolling his eyes at some of it, too.
That's fair.
I kind of like, oh, God, like, that's so obvious.
Right.
Which... I get. Like I said, this is probably about a 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
I feel like the more I watch it, the more inclined I am to, like, pick it apart.
Right. Same.
And the more, like, little things I notice that I'm like, oh, that's dumb. Or, like, oh, they should have done this differently.
Right.
Especially having read the book. Because I think by nature of reading, you become more familiar with the text of a book than you do with a movie, because you spend so much time in the book.
Right, and they describe things for a reason in the book. They don't, you show a house in a movie because they have to be somewhere, you know what I mean? Whereas, like, if you're describing all the elements of a house in a book, it's because it's important.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and even the book, some of it gets a little, like, long.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some of it you're like, that could have been condensed probably just a smidge. But I don't think it was a bad book. I think for the book, I would give that one, like, a 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were a couple little things here and there that I would change, but I don't know. I think the other thing, too, is that doing this kind of podcast and being the kind of person that I am with movies, which is to say that I watch and rewatch movies over and over and over again and I've always been like this, just to see what things I can pick up on that I didn't the first time. I think by nature that, like, you can end up boring yourself.
Yeah.
And you start to, like, lose joy from it a little bit. There are some movies that I will love no matter how many times I watch it, and even if there's a mistake, like, it doesn't matter.
I have a couple of those.
For movies like this, it doesn't get worse the more I watch it, but I feel the need to give myself longer breaks between viewings, because I feel like it gets claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Because there's so much.
Yeah.
So I think if I gave myself, like, a couple months and then watch it again, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I enjoy this movie as a movie, which I do.
Right.
But having seen it, like, 3 times in a week, trying to write notes and, like, prepare for a podcast episode, like, you're like, oh, God, we get it.
Yeah.
Like...
Especially because it is such a long movie for them to throw so much of this in there.
Yeah. Like, it...
It just feels like so much. It almost feels like a chore.
It does kind of feel like a chore. And then you're trying to write everything down, and you're like, I can't even write down every single instance of, like, Christian imagery because there's just so much, and I'd fill up my whole notebook.
Yeah, well, that's why I have so much on the first, like, 10 minutes is, like, there is a lot to unpack in even that amount of time of, like, imagery.
Right.
In the first 10 minutes of the movie, there's, like, so much.
And it's all...
So...
A lot of it's basically saying the same thing, like...
Yeah.
Snakes, baptism, Christ... They're all things that, like, have rebirth associated with them in some way.
Right.
Because snakes shed their skin, and then they grow new skin, and they're a new being, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And Christ died and then came back, and when you're baptized, you're shedding your sins and then transforming, so, like...
Right. And the snake that convinced Eve or whatever to eat the apple, and...
Right, and it's temptation, and, like, the cherry bomb is temptation.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of different symbols that are all getting across the same point, which I think is why it feels like a chore, because I think to do symbolism and to do it well is to have to look for it a little bit. Like, you kind of have to do a little bit of digging, and I think when you're someone like me and you're so immersed in it, yeah, I tend to pick up on them quicker than, like, an average moviegoer might. But I still have to search for it a little bit. And in this, there's, aside from the license plate thing, there's, like, no searching to be had because it's all right in front of you.
Yeah, it's all thrown right at you.
And it just gets, like, I don't know, tiring. And it kind of takes the fun out of it because... I guess, yeah, it's kind of like a big Where's Waldo thing where you're trying to find all the the Christian imagery, like, in a scene, but I don't know, just after a while.
I feel like it's an I Spy book, but, like, somebody has drawn a big red circle about all the things you were supposed to find. It's like, all right, well, now I found all the things because somebody threw it right in my face.
Right.
And I didn't have to look for it.
It's like somebody accidentally gave you, like, the answer to the I Spy.
Yeah.
So they gave you the book with all the answers instead of the book where you have to search for it.
Right.
So it takes all the fun out of it because it's right there and you're like, oh, I didn't have to look for it at all.
Dumb.
I mean, yeah, you can do further research into, like, what it means, but...
Right, but...
Like I said, a lot of it means the same thing.
Over and over again.
So, overall, I definitely liked this movie more when I first saw it.
Yeah, that's a mood.
And I think if I give it some space, I'll...
enjoy it.
Kind of go back... Yeah, it might go back up to, like, an 8 or a 9 out of 10 for me. I think right now I'm a little... Jaded, yeah. Like, I am disenamored from it.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of excited to work on the next movie we're going to talk about.
Mood.
And, like, take a break from... I think generally, too, just Christian imagery for me, I have a really complicated relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find a lot of beauty in it, and I find beauty in, like, Christian and Catholic churches, but I also can't, like, remove the anger and, like, sadness I feel about Christianity and Catholicism at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find it hard for me to remove all of the negative connotations I have with Christianity from the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, I'm really attracted to, like, imagery of Mother Mary and Sacred Hearts and stained glass. Like, I love stained glass. I find it really difficult for me, I think especially as a queer person, to, like, remove my negative connotations with all of that.
Right.
And so I love the imagery of it, but, like, the actual faith I have a problem with.
Right.
To a degree. I'm not saying if there are, like, Christians listening to this, I don't want this to be, like, preachy or, like, I don't...
Anti-preachy.
It's just not for me. Anti-preachy, yeah. I had a thought, but it disappeared.
It died. Like me. I will say, in that one scene before Marin dies and, like, she's talking to Lee, the ladder to the treehouse behind her kind of looks like a cross, because of course.
It does kind of. Yeah, I do. Okay, so I will say I like all the subtle but not subtle cross imagery in it.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of, like, shadows and stuff that end up making cross shapes.
Right.
And that, I think, is cool. Like, I think if it was more of that and less of the other stuff, I'd be more into it.
Yeah.
Because I like little things like that aren't so in your face.
Right.
The other thing, because we're about to wrap up, but before we actually wrap up, also in the book, I know I keep talking about the book, but it's just because I, like, just read it.
You're a bookworm.
I am a bookworm. I read that super fast, too. I, like, got sucked into that one. When Lee is confronting Marin, and he's like, well, you broke up with Iggs so that we could be together, she laughs in his face and is like, I would rather be dead, Lee. I would rather be dead.
Well.
Like, says that to him. So, Marin in the book is kind of a badass, and, like, in the movie, she's this meek...
Right. Little...
Like, demure little thing. Which I think, it's not necessarily not characteristic of her, but I think you can be both.
Right.
And I like Juno Temple for her. I liked her playing Marin, and I like Daniel Radcliffe. I can't imagine it being Shia LaBeouf.
Eating all the bodies.
Oh my god.
Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about horns. I mean...
I think we've talked it to death.
I think we've talked it to death about as much as it, like, hit us over the head with imagery, so... You win some, you lose some.
You know, it is what it is.
Alright. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's more productive to have a conversation with somebody else, because I think, like, Courtney and I are really similar, but we both pick up on different things. So it's nice to just have a conversation with someone instead of trying to do everything by yourself.
Right. So
thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to listen more or to visit the website, you can find us at www.hindsighthorror.com, or you can visit Instagram at Hindsight Horror. I am technically also on Twitter, but I don't update that a ton yet. But you can find us anywhere that podcasts are played, specifically Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Ooh, spoofy.
Spotify. Google Play.
All the things. All the podcasts, all the time.
All of the places where you can find and listen to a podcast, you will find and listen to Hindsight Horror.
Yeah. Also be on the lookout because we're hoping to do a whole bunch of Christmassy themed stuff for December.
Yeah, we picked a really weird way to go about this because we're talking about this super Christian heavy movie and then we're just jumping into weird Christmas movies.
Oh, well, it's the time of the year.
So you can tell that we're coming out on December because we're recording these in advance. So
yeah.
We are hoping to update weekly at 7 p.m. on Fridays. That's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if we put that out there, we're hoping we can stay on track. So if you enjoyed this, please leave us a comment or a review on iTunes. And until next time,
gotta stay spooky.